Yeah. Hey, friends, welcome back to Thrive in Aligned Healing Podcast. This is episode 152, and we have a very special guest today, Kathryn Morrison. She's an amazing coach. I've been coached by her, I've watched her coach, and she has so many zones of genius. And I just wanted to bring her on here and let her be her magical self.
Let's do it. we just started. I'm like, I don't know what we're talking about. You're just gonna lead me. Let's go. So I'm excited.
Yeah. So usually how Dr. Carmen and I roll.
We just jump right in.
Yeah. So Carmen and I are typically outside of the box thinkers, right? Like we don't really fit in the conventional boxes of mental health or medicine. And I followed you a while, Kathryn, and I don't think that you're an inside the box thinker either. So what would you say your zone of genius outside of the box is, if you would agree with that statement?
Oh my gosh. I mean, what immediately comes to mind, like you saying that just reminded me, we're hiring for someone new in my company right now. And I had a friend reach out. He's actually like an old neighbor. And he wrote to me and he was like, I think I might have someone for your VA position. She's feral with a lot of sparkle. I think she'll be perfect. And I was just like, he gets my brand when he's like, I know who's going to be perfect for you. They're feral. And like, I could hear that word and I'm like, yes, that probably is the person. And I loved it because she like sent in her video yesterday. I was like, this is 100% the person we need in this company. So, I mean, I guess I would call myself a little wild. And I think it is like, I mean, for every single person probably listening to this podcast, everyone's coming into their own alignment with like, what does that look like for me? Yeah. And I've just always been a little bit of a weirdo, like outside of the mainstream. And I think like when I was a kid, I was like a little punk rock kid. I had my septum pierced. Like I was just always like, I gravitated right towards that. And I think for me, that's looked a lot of different ways over time. And you've probably seen me dance outside of many boxes.
I have.
You've been following me.
I have. I've seen you evolve quite a bit over the years.
You've probably seen me naked on the internet. I mean, it's fine.
No, there's lots of naked pics of me on the internet as well. I'm just ready to get paid for them at this point. So what would you say, like, how has that benefited your business?
I'm very clearly defined. Right? I think it's sort of like one of the things I think about a lot, like I run a branding program, and one of the biggest things that I've seen with myself and like all of the clients that sort of come through that work is like, the more you define who you are, you start to identify like, oh, wait, I'm actually like sitting inside of like 17 different boxes. I mean, let's be real, it's probably like 700, right? Like 700 different boxes of like who I was taught to be, how I was taught to show up, like all of these different things. And the more we step out of those boxes, truthfully, we're out on our own, right? Which like the brain hates, and the brain is like, I don't want to be alone at all. I don't want to be separate from the crowd. But from a strategic business standpoint, standing apart from the crowd is very valuable because you look very different. You sound very different, right? Like as a business, you think about like your unique value prop, right? Like if you're standing outside of all the boxes, your unique value proposition is very different. And so it stops being that like people are looking at you in a sea of many and they see you outside of all the boxes, and what you're going to stand, every single person listening is going to have a different thing that is for them. But when you're willing to step outside of those boxes, the scary thing is you're seen very clearly, but that's also very valuable for business because you're seen very clearly.
Yeah, that makes sense. So how did you, because we're both coaches, so I'm going to use a little bit of coach world verbiage. How did you create safety for yourself or like your nervous system? Or maybe that wasn't even an issue for you to be seen like that.
No, I think it was a very big issue. Like when I first started, I had like I made like a logo for my company just so I could have it as my Instagram picture.
Okay.
Like I was deeply, deeply hiding. I was like, listen, if I could just grow my business using stock photos, we would be great. Could I just do that? Right. And so I think I remember actually thinking like, listen, it's not about me. It's about like, I want to help clients. And I don't want to take the time to like establish myself and step outside of the boxes and like be fully seen, because it's not about me. I don't want to be seen. I just want to help the people. Right. But I think and I don't know, like this might go in a different direction. I don't know like what sort of things your audience is working on doing, but like when you're thinking about wanting to help people or wanting to make a difference or wanting, right, like it was so interesting because like what I told myself was like I didn't want to be seen, and that was like egoic, but actually me being willing to be seen is the thing that has been allowed me to help so many more people, right? And so I think it was to create safety. I mean, that's more of like a nervous system. They're like, I mean, listen, lots of deep breathing exercises, holotropic breath work. Like there's so many different modalities we could talk about that I used like to help myself like in my nervous system. But I do also think that like there's times where actually just shifting the perspective of a thought, right? Because I think about if we're looking at like I think it's safety is associated with everybody liking me, then I probably want to decouple those in my brain.
Yeah.
Right. Which is like a thing I see a lot of people when they're scared to show up as themselves or they're scared to show up online. It's like, oh, like if I show up as myself, then I won't be able to, I'll be rejected by people, or I won't be able to find clients. Right. And so I think it's like, if you look at those associations, like one is like, if you associate it with your ability to have money, and we associate money with our ability to have physical, right? Like a roof over our head and food on the table, then that's terrifying, right? If it's like, everyone's going to reject me and I'm going to be alone, like there's deep primal associations with like, if you got abandoned, you would be dead.
Right? Yeah.
And so I think like understanding what was actually at play, like understanding that part of myself, like that was what was at play, actually allowed me to have so much more compassion. Because otherwise my brain's just like, why aren't you just posting? Just get over yourself. Right. That was the way I spoke to myself when I first came into this work. Right. And so I think it was like between different sorts of modalities with my mind and my body, and then just cultivating like so much understanding and compassion, and then the willingness to move forward.
Yeah. Carmen, do you have any questions?
That's perfect. Thank you for sharing that. I resonate with a lot of that because that's kind of where I'm at right now. Is I'm trying to put more out there as far as like online and like the social media world and YouTube, and I have a pretty decent size like population, and I much rather work with people one-on-one, and I don't like putting yourself out there on the internet's a little bit scary. And but reframing it, right, that this is just another opportunity for me to serve and to share that value with folks, really helps to kind of reframe it so it doesn't seem as scary. Yeah, just jumping in and doing it.
Yeah. And I think it's just like understanding, it's like there's the existential, like I'm going to be left alone. And then I think there's so much conditioning that we've had as women. Like, don't take up, I mean, I don't know if you got this, but like, don't take up space. I was often like told I was too much. And listen, I mean, I'm a lot. So like, for me to be willing to like, oh, like, I think I'm going to be too much for people. I think I'm going to be, and to be like, oh, wait, like whose voice is that? Where did that come from? And like, do I actually agree with that? And I just think it's so fun now, because now that I show up with like my giant rainbow background and my big earrings and my loudness, like it is actually healing. It's like deeply healing for a lot of people. But I spent like a long time, like when I was little, just being told like my feelings were too much, my energy was too much. And this process is like, we heal on the path to showing up for ourselves, and then us showing up actually heals others.
Yeah. Sure. I wasn't told I was too much. You're too intense.
Yeah.
Turn
Which,
that
I
down.
mean, it's like a different flavor of too much though, right? Like the language is different, but it's the same kind of vibe. And I think there is like, sometimes it's like, oh yeah, like I am going to be too much for people. Like I have a very like piercing energy. So I recognize when I speak in a room, the energy shifts and people look at me, right? Like it happens. And so I used to think that that was like not safe, or it wasn't okay, or I shouldn't take up too much space. And then I was just like, wait, but if I have something to share, maybe I shouldn't mute myself. But yeah, I could totally see like our intensity. We might be too intense for some people. Those aren't your people.
Yeah. Are you a projector?
I'm a manifester.
Are you?
I've got my repelling aura.
I'm a projector. So it's like I see through your soul. And people are like, back it off. So what is your advice for women that just keep getting in their own way then? That they don't fully like trust themselves? Like you've stepped into that. I feel like you fully trust yourself and like you're not getting in your own way anymore. Like what does that look like for women? Your advice for them?
I just like to recognize, and I wouldn't even say I've like fully stepped, like I think we're all just walking each other home. Right. And so I think I feel really unbound in like a lot of ways, but there's still like little things, like I'm a human like everyone else. Right. And so I do actually think to just recognize, and I don't know, this maybe isn't the thing to say, but there's no like point of arrival.
Yeah.
And this is just like a journey. And I might have like unbound 1,000 hooks that some of your listeners might like still have. And I don't know, it really has been, I actually started to envision it sort of like who I wanted to be. I had a clear vision of her. And then I just imagined everything that was keeping me from that was just like a hook from some belief I'd had from the past. Some like I call tradition, it's just like dead people haunting us, right? But like past generations and all of their belief systems that like we're just running. I'm like, have we even questioned them? Right. Mm-hmm. And so like it started to feel fun to me when I was like, oh, that's just another hook. Yeah. And I started to I can like energetically feel when I find something and I like release a hook. It's like I can like feel it sort of like clear from my field. And I'm a little bit more sovereign. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I think sometimes people they don't want to have like patience for the process.
Yeah.
Right. But it's like however old you are, if it took you, I don't know, it's probably like early 30s when I came into this work. And I think I'm pretty far along, like a few years in, but just a year into that, I was still real messy.
Yeah. Yeah. Same here. I've been in the coaching world since 2019.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's like when we begin to soften into it as like, this is just a lifelong journey of like becoming more intimate with myself and my desires and what I want in the world, and an understanding of like my patterns and like compassion for that, the faster we're able to like actually unhook from all of those things.
Yeah. It sounds like what you're saying is like, I just didn't make it a problem, Kim. I understood that this is just part of the journey and I just didn't make it a problem. Where I think a lot of times I make it a problem because I have a thought, if I can get out of my own way, then I can be more successful.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Which I think it's like even interesting to think about the framing of if I get out of my own way. Cause I think of it as like, I am like completely clear on where I'm going. And I think of those hooks as like, oh, that's not me. That's just like little bits that I picked up along the way. But I think you're saying that's like, I need to get out of my own way. I need to like let go. But it's like, oh, no, wait, like, oh, wait, this isn't me. I have to just let this go. Oh, wait, this isn't me. But like, I was taught this for a long time. So there's like a lot of emotional charge around it. Yeah. Right. And so it's like, it's less of like, I'm mad at myself because I'm just like annoying and I wish I would just get over it. And it's more like, oh my gosh, wow, this shit runs deep. Oh wait, am I allowed to curse?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I've been on a podcast tour and like every time it's like a curse word always ends up flying out of my mouth. I'm like, I'm sorry, is this rated clean? Because we're going to have to beep that.
We say fuck a lot. I say fuck a lot. And I tell everybody, like, look, you work with veterans for years. Like, you will not survive in that world if you don't learn how to say that word in every sentence.
But yeah, I think it's like if you can get into the mindset of it's like me supporting myself and we're just looking at these like bits of conditioning and bits of like things together. and looking at what do we want to do with those? Do we want to keep them? Do we want to release them? Do we want to like renegotiate some of our thoughts about them because they feel like some of these beliefs are real weird, right? It's a much more enjoyable journey.
Yeah. Like what I hear you saying is like, I didn't make it. It wasn't something wrong with me, Kim. And like your analogy with the hook is like, I still got to move forward. These hooks just kind of like slowed me down versus my vision is like, I'm standing in my way in the path, blocking myself. Right. And it's something wrong with me. So I can see the differences in the way.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's like when it's even languaging of like, get out of your own way. I don't know. Like for some people that might feel fine and there might not be a charge with it, but I really think of this as like, this isn't like an individual, like, oh, it's just Kim that's doing this.
Right.
It's like, oh, wait, it's like pretty collective, right? Like if we just look at like the general human population, maybe this isn't just like it's a me problem.
Yeah.
Right. And if you can look at like, wait, I see like most of the human population like struggling with a lot of these things. Maybe this isn't just about me.
Yeah. And that feels so much more empowering, right? Because it's like, oh, that I can lead the charge as a female leader. I can lead the charge and to help the collective.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's like, it makes it so much less personal because so often, and it's like, and I think this is why like coaching and like being in communities like that, like personal development communities can be so healing because there's so many things that we like sit inside of our own brains and it's like, it's just me, right? Like there's something deeply wrong with me. And then you just like hear someone else and it's like everyone could raise their hand. Like who feels like they don't fit in? Who feels like they're not enough? Who feels like they're too much, right? And like you would see every hand go up. And so it's like the more that you see, it's like this is just runs deep in the collective. It's just like, oh, okay. So like maybe this isn't a me in my own way. Maybe this is just like layers of stuff to untangle that like all of us are working on. And if I can lead the charge on that, people heal as they watch me embody that.
Yeah. I love that. That's so good.
Yeah. That's very true. I think we've kind of been taught or programmed not to talk about those things. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's like, oh no, you keep that to yourself. So when you start expressing it out loud and sharing it with your community, right, people resonate with that. They're like, oh, that's how I'm feeling, or that's, the thought process or the expectations. And so to see how that plays out with somebody else can be very empowering.
Yeah. And I think everyone's going to have their own perspective or background on this. But like, at least for me, before I came into personal development, like I never even stepped foot in like a therapist's office. Right. And there was like this thought of like, well, if you're going to do that, like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's so interesting that like, that's where like in some, I don't think it's like all cultures. And I do think that we're moving forward like very quickly on like the mental health front when we look at like the levels of anxiety and burnout. But like, there's just been this sort of like, well, shouldn't you just be fine?
Yeah.
It's like, maybe not.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to take a left turn.
Let's go.
Too. Like even within the, I'm pretty outspoken about this, even within the mental health industry, therapy world, there is this theme of like, you're broken. There's something wrong with you. Right. Like I even went to a talk today and the lady was talking about ADHD and how she's neurodivergent and like how like basically this is a lifelong sentence. Like her brain's different. This is just how I'm always going to be. And like everything inside my body is like, that's fucking bullshit. Like ADHD is a chemical conversion problem that you can easily fix. This is not a lifelong sentence, but like even that rhetoric inside of that world of like, well, just kind of, you're a little bit broken.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think there's like certain things where it's like I don't think it's ever helpful to say like, I am broken. I do think it's also interesting when like, there's so many rabbit holes we could dive into here, but it's sort of like, there's then if like, oh, okay, like I have this thing or I am this way. And then it's like, are you going to use that in a way to like empower yourself? Or are you going to use it as a way to say like, this is why I can't have what I want or be what I want or do what I want in this lifetime?
Yeah. But why does it even need to be like proposed? I mean, this is like a whole different other topic, but like, I just don't understand why it needs to be proposed as like or propaganded as something's wrong with you. It's like, you don't go to the doctor when you have like broke your arm and like, oh, I'm just a person with a broken arm for the rest of my life. It's like, yeah, I have a broken arm. It's going to heal and I'm going to have a normal arm.
Yeah.
I mean, I do also think, and I don't know, like we could click into so many different parts of this, but it's even interesting to me to think of the idea of like neurodivergence and like, oh, I'm like on the spectrum. And I'm like, aren't we all?
Yeah, we all
we're all on a spectrum, right? And so some of us might be like at a point where there's an actual thing that's put onto it, right? But I'm just like, everybody has some version of something about themselves. We all exist on a spectrum.
Yeah. I mean, if you like boil it down, and Carmen, you can chime in here. This is your area of expertise. Like if you just boil it down, like there's two things, like perspective, the thoughts,
yeah,
and the neurochemicals. That's it. So it puts us on the spectrum, like where are my perspective and like where's my neurochemicals? That's it. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, Carmen?
Yeah, that's kind of the definition of a spectrum, right? Is that especially if you're putting like our human experience, right? Our level of neurotransmitters, how our brain functions, right? We all fall on technically the same spectrum. A lot of people like to use this idea of being neurodivergent as like a separate spectrum. Yeah. But I also think that sometimes people find safety in those labels and being in that box. And so I think that's where a lot of that challenge comes from. Because what I've noticed is that when people are out searching for they want a reason, right, as to why they think a certain way or why they do things a certain way, and or why they're feeling a certain way, and when they get that label, sometimes people that becomes their identity. There's like safety in that, and so they're not seeing it as, oh, okay, this is a stepping stone or an option of, okay, now that I have a label or a diagnosis or a framework, what am I going to choose to do with that? Right? Do I want to change that? Am I happy here? Right? Yeah. And I think that's where sometimes that, being in the box, and I translate to like kind of the conventional world or the majority in that, people have been programmed to find that. And so, I mean, it takes a lot of courage to step out of that and to say, oh, okay, what am I going to do with this information?
Yeah. I mean, we actually, I just had a live event for my highest level mastermind, and we had a videographer come, and he is diagnosed autistic. But like for him, it's like the same thing that you could say is like a problem with like maybe so many things for him day to day was the same thing that allows him to see like visually the tiniest detail that no one else would notice. Right. And so it was like interesting because I think like for us, there were certain things for us to like help support him so that he could like thrive. And then I was like, I'm so grateful. Like your brain is perfect because the way that you're able to video and see the way that the edits need to go and see like even the slightest shade of red, like he would notice like something that was like way out in the background. Yeah. Right. And he was like, oh, wait, we need to move that because it's going to like mess the shot up. Right. And it's just like, you could say like, oh my gosh, this is like, what a problem. And I'm like, it makes you a superhero in like the work that you're doing. So it's like,
yeah, I think that's probably why I riff against labels. It's like, that's his zone of genius. Let's celebrate that. That man's like able to have like that zone of genius, which my brain is not wired to do that. Right. Like celebrating that rather than like labeling us out. I don't know. That was a whole tangent. Sorry.
Yeah. But I think it's like, no matter what the thing is, like there's always like an empowering way to look at what it is. And if you're able to see it as empowering, like you'll be able to move forward. And I do think it was like really cool to hear we ended up talking quite a bit about like his journey and what it had been like for him. And like, he spent a lot of time feeling like really resentful and down. And then he was like, wait a second, like I can do this. And actually I like even learned about him. He'd grown, he just started doing his own video stuff because he like had an eye for it. And he grew like a TikTok audience of over 50,000 people because he was just like so good at video. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, that's just leaning into like, oh, okay, like this is my superpower. Let me watch world, watch me flex.
Yeah. I love that.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Okay. So here's a totally different question for you.
Okay.
How do you not, I've heard in our world, like not being attached to the results, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like, business isn't personal. Well, how do you not take business personal, and how are you not attached to the results? Because I think that's like a skill. Yeah.
I'm asking for a friend.
Right. If anything, I'm a very honest human.
Well, here's like, and I do think it's like what is so interesting. I've thought about this, and I think a perspective I have about myself that I think is really different than a lot of what you hear in like personal development spaces, but I don't make it a problem at all, is like I have no problem admitting to myself where I'm deficient.
Okay.
Like business is just a set of skills. That's all business is, right? And so it's like, I don't make my lack of results mean that I am inherently bad or wrong. I don't make it mean anything about, right? Like if I have a goal and I don't hit it, it's never like Kathryn bad. It's like, oh, okay. Like there's just like there's just a set of skills that I'm learning to cultivate and build. And just like everything else, it exists on a spectrum, right? And so like maybe I just haven't mastered certain skills to be at the level that I want to be at yet. Mm-hmm. So that inherently would mean I'm quote unquote deficient, but I don't believe that my potential is deficient, right? I believe that if I'm like not at where I want to be, maybe it's a mindset or a belief thing. Maybe it's a genuine business skill set thing. And I think this sort of ties really beautifully into our first discussion, which is just like, I don't think I'm in my own way. I'm on team Kathryn, just looking at like, what hooks do we need to unwind? And then on the other side, I'm looking at, and what skills do I need to build? And then in that sense, it's always like, if I have like a goal that I want to achieve and I don't hit it, I'm looking at one of those two things, right?
Yeah.
And that like that to me, it's like, it's not personal, because I think we covered this in the beginning, right? Like the part around like the beliefs about myself and like sort of the deconditioning, like I don't feel personal. Like I don't attack myself in any of that work. And then with skill sets, of course I have deficiencies. Like, listen, y'all, I'm actually so excited. We just went in, our Facebook ads funnel is now bringing in around $20,000 a month, but it took us like 9 months of falling on my face repeatedly to create that result. Right. And if I had like made it mean that there was something wrong with me, I would have felt bad, and I would have wanted to like not look at it or stop the funnel or do something, versus just like, okay, like I obviously just need to sharpen my messaging skills. I need to sharpen our visual branding, so we're able to like be super clear to cold traffic, like who we're looking to attract in. Right. So it was always just like, me making it mean anything bad about myself is off the table. I can look at like, do I have a weird belief? Then I don't make that mean anything bad about me either. I just find the belief and I work on it. And then on the other side, it's just like, and then it's just business.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's helpful.
Yeah. I'm always intrigued by brains like yours. Like, how did you get there to have that awareness versus like maybe perhaps a brain like mine that's like, I just make it mean something about me.
I mean, listen, I had a long time of doing that. I used to have journals where I would write like, you should be ashamed of yourself.
Oh.
Like legit. Like I have like some, and I kept them. I haven't thrown them away, because it's like good for me to look back to just show like, oh, like, and I wonder why I felt shame.
Right.
Maybe I felt shame because I was literally writing journal entries about how I should be ashamed of myself. And then I just had to realize like my part in that. It didn't mean that like, listen, I had been taught to hold shame. It wasn't my fault, but like, I was like, oh, okay. But now that I see it, maybe I stopped writing that to myself in my journal, and I stopped talking to myself that way in my head.
Yeah.
Right. And I think building awareness is always our first step to change.
Yeah.
And so I think like the more that I just like built awareness, and the more that I don't know, it was just like, I knew I wasn't going to stop. I knew what I wanted for my life. And I just recognized if I supported myself on the path, I would just get there so much faster.
Yeah. I love that. I think it's so helpful for people to understand that, right? Because then we look, it's so easy to look at the highlight reels and just separate them from us. Like, they're special, they have unicorn blood, blah, blah, blah. That can't ever be me, versus like hearing it come from you. Like, no, I just like you guys. Like, I have journal stacks of like shaming myself. Like, so it makes it possible.
Yeah. It's just like, I just saw where if I was like, if I keep writing this and saying this in my head, I just don't like where that one, I don't like how it feels. And I can see the impact it has, because when I am feeling ashamed, I don't show up, I hide, right? Like, shame always creates hiding, right? And so it was like, I mean, I told y'all in the beginning of my business, I had a logo that was like words. I was like, can we just not show my face, please? Right? So I think it was just getting on board with myself a lot sooner. And I see a lot of people not do that.
Yeah.
I do think like, honestly, I mean, I don't, this could be a whole other tangent, but I feel like having the spiritual awakening that I had makes it also feel like it's not about Kathryn the human at all. It really feels like I feel very compelled, like I'm here to actually help like create change in the collective. And it's so interesting because it's sort of like, that could also just be a belief, right? Like, it's sort of like it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like, it feels like a deep intuition in my bones. But even if it was just a belief, right? Like, who I am really matters. What I'm here to do really matters. It makes a difference. Like, having those beliefs will fuel you. It will like take the future and you get pulled, right? And I think that like so many people fundamentally just believe that they don't matter, or that they're like, that they're not here to do anything of significance. And significance could just be like being a great mom to your kids. Significance could be starting a community group in your local town, right? Like, everyone's going to have their own definition of like, what does that mean to me? It's like, what do you want on your tombstone? What do you want people to be saying, right? Like, at your funeral. And are you living in a way that's like aligned with that?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. I think that that's a really important piece, right? We talk a lot about the mind, body, spirit connection. And when it also helps in keeping that perspective, right? When, at least for me, in my business, I find it a lot easier to like do things that I'm scared to do, right? Or that don't come easy, because I feel like it's for the greater good.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, it really is a very different, when you believe you're a spiritual being having a human experience, your like relationship with like all the weird human stuff is very different.
Yeah, very true.
Like, there's so many weird, like, and I can just like, I can have a sense of humor and like laugh at it, right? When I'm like able to just see me in my own muck and just be like, I love you so much. You're going to get through this. And it's great.
Yeah. It's hard. I have a belief it's like our soul. My soul knew what it was coming for when it came here, and it knew what it was agreeing to. And it has this journey that was filled with both good and bad. And it's just here for it.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's sort of like you're either, and it is so interesting when people are just like, no, it's like everything's just like always supposed to be great and love and light. And I'm just like, I'm pretty sure we were here to like, I mean, at least to me, it's like to evolve into our greatest expression, to evolve into our like greatest potential. And like any good story, nobody wants to watch a Hollywood movie where everybody's winning all the time. Right? Like, we want to see like, what does this person grow through? How do they build resilience? How do they approach challenges? Like, where are they, like, where it feels like they just keep getting back up, right? Like, those are always the movies we love, right? It's like the person that just like they will just keep getting back up. And those movies always end well, because if you keep getting back up, you win.
Right. Right. Yeah. So then what do you see? Like, you're clear, you have this vision of where you're headed, right? And like your spiritual awakening, like, what do you that's came through to you, I guess I'll phrase it that way. Like, what is your vision for what your soul is here to do, or the change that it's here to create?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think, like, what's so interesting is I don't know exactly what the change is or why it matters, but I've like, I've talked about this on a couple of podcasts recently. I've just like received a vision and I kept seeing it where it was like there was a community of people. And I would say it's like a higher consciousness community, a spiritual community where it's like literally an actual neighborhood, likely with a retreat center where there's like a physical space. And what that does, I mean, I could make guesses as to what that does for the collective, right? But like, it's so interesting because I feel like at this point in time, it's so fascinating because we're all online and we're all able, no matter how niche or whatever our interests are, we're able to find a community that is similar to us. And I was just talking to someone the other day who like, she lives in a town where there's just like not a lot of people like her in her small town. And so all of her friends now just exist online. Right. And I see like there's this like this really interesting, and I really would not be surprised if we start to see this happen more and more frequently, where it's like we have these really robust, deep communities online, and there are people that just like live all over the world. I think we're going to see more and more of those things actually turn into and just go back to physical, like someone will start a physical community that like has people with like-minded interests, like-minded whatever. That's just more like intentional and conscious. I mean, I think we could think about it as like, we all could identify the places where we grew up had a certain way of believing things. And if you didn't align with that, you were just like, I don't know if I want to be here. Yeah. And I don't know. I think it's like really interesting to think about the power of what would happen. And for me, it's like, I really love the idea of it being like digital entrepreneurs who are all working towards things in like a similar realm. And what happens if all of them came together in community? It's like really fun for me to think about.
Yeah, that would be super cool.
Just wait. It's going to happen.
Oh, I believe it is.
It's actually really interesting. Like when you see certain things come into your field, I just got like a Facebook ad the other day for a guy who like ran an online business for a long time. And then his whole ad was how he like sold his business. And now he's like opening this like really like next level retreat space in Utah. You better believe I followed him so fast. And I'm just like, it's not just me, like other people are like being called to like go from the digital space into like creating physical spaces that like call communities in together.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, we saw in COVID, we were all like, can we please be around people? Yeah.
I mean, if I'm listening to you and I'm like, well, that's basically like my life. Like all my friends and colleagues are virtual.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think for some people, maybe that doesn't matter, but I think there's like really, I do think having like in-person friendships and in-person relationships and the ability to like connect with people at a deeper level, like I think it makes a big difference. There's a reason why for like millennia, right? Like it's actually quite modern that we live in the structures that we live in, where it's like individual families.
Right.
They're just like, okay, figure it out on your own.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, we actually have a much longer history of like living together in community, and like every person had their unique gifts and we would all help each other. And like,
yeah,
I mean, listen.
Yeah. I mean, we're mammals. Dr. Carmen and I talk about this, right? Like we're part of the animal kingdom and we're mammals, and most mammals are pack.
Yeah.
Animals. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's cool. I like that idea, Kathryn.
Thanks.
That's exciting. There's a lot of power there behind that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have other questions for Dr. Carmen?
I wanted to ask, so what is a kind of key bit of information you kind of wish everybody knew? Like help them be successful. Yeah.
A key bit of information. I mean, it probably would just come back to the idea of like the hooks and like the, like, it's not about like, there's nothing wrong with you. Like look around at our society. There's a reason why there's like very rampant levels of like anxiety, burnout, like a lot of people like overdrink, like all those things. Right. And so like it's so helpful to just, when you can stop feeling isolated and really just open your eyes and be like, wait, this isn't just me. And there's something that shifts deep inside when I think you like really start to realize like there's nothing wrong with me. This is just like there's just collective gunk that I really do think we are in like a very deep collective reshuffle. Like, I don't know if y'all have noticed, but there's like some power structures that are falling. And I don't think it's like been totally made clear what's going to rise. And I do think we might have a little bit of like a bumpy middle, but like we've had thousands of years of like really yucky ways of people governing other people, and really like awful ways that women were treated, and really awful ways that minorities were like, right? Like, we could go on and on and on. Right. But I think it's like to just recognize like we are in this, it feels like a reckoning right now globally. I mean, we could even like just extend it to like global warming, right? And like extreme weather is just the earth just trying to purge, right? The same way we're talking about purging all of our hooks and weird stuff and like the yucky gunk that's in us. Like the earth is also like, can we give a minute for Mama Gaia, right? Like, and so I do think the future is bright, but if we can just have, I think it's like faith and belief that like whether it's our own individual journey or like with all of this sort of collective reshuffling going on, that like holding through, that like there is a brighter dawn.
Yeah, I do agree. Things are definitely changing. Things are definitely changing and shifting. Yeah. I would like to think that it's for the better. So I would, yeah, agree with that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would help the collective to understand like, okay, these are hooks, these are collective, whatever you want to call it, programming, whatever, generational, whatever. So then,
and to just like, it's not mine to carry. Yeah. I think that's so helpful. Like, this isn't mine to carry. I picked it up accidentally, right? Like you could just imagine yourself carrying like a bunch of trays and it's like, wait, this isn't mine to carry. I can put it down. Yeah. And how much lighter you feel when you put it down.
It unifies us, right? Like, yeah. Like we're not alone. I'm not separate. We're not opposed to each other. Like we have more in common than we do the differences, right? Yeah. It's like, yeah. So then it feeds into the statement you said, we're all just walking each other home.
Yeah, I feel that.
What do you feel like? Because I know you're into female leadership. Mm-hmm. What is your idea of a effective, healthy female leader?
I think before we even have that discussion, it's like important to think about, I would call it more like feminine leadership.
Okay, I think right? And
to like, yeah, and to even like define what that means.
Okay,
right. And so honestly, like to me, like there's the thinking mind, there's consciousness, and then there's like feeling and intuition and like all of like the realms of that world, right?
Okay.
And to me, being feminine led means like I stop feeling like I'm thinking about my decisions. And this is like really interesting, but like I started to notice my language shift between like I'm thinking into it versus I'm feeling into it. Mm-hmm. But for me, oftentimes, like when you have a lot of hooks and a lot of gunk, it's actually, and I think that can be scary, but like to recognize when you have like mixed signals in your body mm-hmm. that just come from like sort of beliefs and things that need to get cleared. But like now that I'm pretty clear in my channel, like I can just feel what is for me and what is not for me and what is my desire. And I'm going to follow that. Right. And so when I think about what that looks like, it's like I use my thinking mind to create whatever it needs to do in order to like go where I'm feeling led, I'm feeling desire, I'm feeling a pull. And so it's very much more like intuition first, desire led. Like, because I think if we get into, there's like desires like I want a Mercedes. And I mean, I don't know, maybe that's like a soul thing for some people. Like maybe you were just meant to be royalty. I don't know. Right. But like for a lot of people, that's more of like an ego, like, oh, I was like taught to want these things. And then when I want these things, I can respect myself versus like these like soul desires. Like, listen, nobody taught me to want to like start a community. Like, that for sure was never a thing. Mom and dad were like, hey, you know what I would really be proud of you if you did?
Right.
you started a higher consciousness spiritual community. Like definitely not a thing I ever received, right? And so I think it's like feeling into like, what are those desires that no one taught you to have?
Mm-hmm.
And honoring those first, and then using the thinking mind and the strategy mind to figure out how you create a path there. And sometimes for me, it like feels like, oh, it's time to use my thinking mind. And sometimes it's like, oh, it's time for me to actually like get out of my thinking mind and to relax and get deeply receptive. And it turns out like when a woman is deeply relaxed, a woman is deeply wise. I mean, I think it's true for anybody, right? But for me, we're talking about feminine leadership. And oftentimes when I feel like there's like something gunky in my head, if I just take a moment and backtrack and relax, ideas drop in.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's like, what? Like that to me, like, how is that not divine? Like, no one can tell us where ideas come from. All I know is that when I'm deeply relaxed, they drop in faster.
Yeah. I love that definition of feminine leadership, because sometimes you get like definitions of like, it's kind of, what have I heard it? Like receiving. It seems very passive.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not wired to be super passive. But I can connect to following my intuition and my desire.
Yeah.
Like I love the spin that you put on that.
Yeah, well, and I do think I've like thought a lot about this. I do think there is a little bit in like the manifestation space of just like, it's not like, oh, you're just like, everything's gonna like, we're not like vision boarding our way to like multi-million-dollar empires, like said no one ever, right? I think it's like really interesting. Actually, I was just looking, there was like a manifestation babe. She's like a really popular Instagrammer, right? She like put out this report on her last year. And that bitch had more analytics in there than like I ever used in my business, right? So I'm like, if like the leader of manifestation is like deeply tracking the analytics of what's going on their Instagram and their platforms and everything else, like, can we have a moment that like the people who are the most successful in the manifestation space are not just like, oh, the mind doesn't matter and like, never mind data, right? Like, it's just really interesting. But at the same time, I do think it's like, every single person, when you really get honest, I think every person has a different energetic rhythm.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Tell me more.
And so I think it's like when you tune into like, what are my desires? And like, I think most people are conditioned to overact.
Okay.
Right? Like to take more action than is needed. And I think that's a healing process in and of itself. Right. And for me, I started to feel it. It's like it was like in my belly, right? When it feels like I'm like pushing. Then I'm like, oh, I'm like starting to go into like gripping or overaction versus like, I'm really just feeling into this, I relaxed myself. I got an intuitive download. I'm like moving towards it. But when it starts to feel like pushy, sometimes I'm like, oh, okay, like let me like relax myself and go back in and take action from like a different place. And I think for some people that might be like journaling, looking at their thoughts. For me, oftentimes just like cultivating different energetic states in my body and then like seeing if anything wants to get released, seeing if I'm wanting to like call anything in, like I'll use spiritual practices, I use mindset practices, I use all the things. But I think some people have sort of energetic rhythms where like when they're deeply in alignment, they do take a lot of action.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's other people where like when they're deeply in alignment, they are actually less active. And it doesn't mean they don't take any action, but they are very receptive. And I see those people still get great results, but they're like, they understand that they're more like laid back energetically. And sometimes I used to get annoyed at them because I'm just like, I'm so annoyed at you because you just don't seem to have to do a lot. And like, you got lots of amazing results. But then I just fell into it. But I was like, when I'm like really feeling pulled by the future, I am a person that tends to take a lot more action.
Yeah.
And if I can allow that action to feel good and I don't allow it to go into overworking, then we're off to the races.
That's so good. Yeah. Because I do. It's like, just make your manifestation board, your vision board, and it's coming. It's like, has not worked so far.
Yeah, it is just like very interesting to me. Like I know people, and even it's so interesting. I was even at an event. It was like it was like a 3-day event, and it was like, let's dance and let's like sing. And listen, I'm all in for that. I'm
Okay.
all in for it. I was dancing and singing. I was on board. But at the same time, as a business coach, I was tracking, yes. And then you had an email sequence that was set up ahead of time. And you had like a very planned, like, and here's where we're going to like tell you about the program. And we've like planned the bonuses ahead of time. Right. And so I just like, I do think, and it makes sense if you're selling something that is just like embodiment and dance and singing, that's what you're going to talk about. But I think sometimes in those spaces, it can confuse people if they're not looking at like, oh, wait, but like this person that was like, we were dancing and singing mantras and all the things, like they had an email sequence, right? Like they had links, they had like a plan with like, and then like they were prompting people, like, if you want to come talk to us, come, like they had all of the masculine business strategy, all that was there, right? So it's just like very weird to me. Like, look at, if you think that someone's telling you just like make a vision board, I promise, did you get there through a funnel? Did you get there through right? Like, to just like actually look at like what's happening on the back end? And I don't know. That's
what I love about your brain though, is that you're able to see both, because I'm one of those people who's like, okay, dancing. I'm not understanding why I'm not making money. I did the dance. So to like, you had to point it out, like, no, there's both, Kim. There's both. You got to see both. I was like, oh, I didn't see that. I didn't understand that part of the story. I see now.
Listen, I mean, I think like dance is very good for me with like regulating myself, raising my vibration. I do believe all that stuff matters, but I'm just like, we also exist in a 3D reality. There might be a few other things besides dancing.
Right, like a funnel. I'd be good.
I mean, it doesn't, and I don't want you to like think that now you need to go build. It's just like there needs to be some sort of way to like meet clients, nurture clients, make offers to clients.
Yeah, no, I totally get what you're saying. I know. Yeah. This has been so fun. Yeah. So, Kathryn, tell people, it'll be in the show notes, but how can they connect with you?
If you listen to podcasts, which you do because you're here, I have a podcast called Ascension Through Entrepreneurship. So if you run your own business and you feel like what you're doing feels like a calling, you would love my podcast, come find me there. Or you can go to my website, www.kathrynmorrisoncoaching.com. It's going to be in the show notes, so you can go there to see the spelling. And then on Instagram, I'm at Kathryn Morrison Coaching.
Yeah. Anything else? Any last comments? You good, Carmen?
Dance and strategy. Let's just mic drop there.
Both. Don't make those damn manifestation boards without some strategy, people. It doesn't work. I'll tell you firsthand experience.
I love it.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much, Kathryn, for being on here, and we'll see you guys next week.